Okay, so welcome to Tree Soup D&D. Got another video for you today. This time it's about the schools of magic in Dungeons & Dragons, and more specifically about specialization for wizards in a particular school of magic. So this is the list of magic schools that I'm sure you have a passing familiarity with, at least. I also wanted to show you this older version of the list of magic schools. This comes from, I think, 2nd edition rulebooks. I wasn't playing Dungeons & Dragons back in 2nd edition, but I do have some familiarity with it from playing games like Baldur's Gate and Icewind Dale and Torment, but I never started playing until 5th edition. But if you look at this list of the schools, you'll see a few of them have got slightly different names, like transmutation. It's called alteration. Several of them have got more than one name. You've got enchantment / charm, conjuration / summoning, but they are essentially the same 8 schools. They haven't changed in all these decades. But as you can see, they're arranged in a circle, and the purpose of this is that they are supposed to be opposing disciplines. So the school of illusion is counter to the school of necromancy. There is some rivalry and also some denial of the opposite power of magic. Now, in modern Dungeons and Dragons, they have slowly and regularly lifted lots of restrictions from character creation and character selection to the point where you can make a lot of flexible builds, and the choices are quite vast. But the further you go back, the more restrictions you have to various things. I'd say it's probably a good thing they've lifted more of the restrictions, just because it allows the player for more flexibility and just create lots more different character tropes. There is a certain interest and a certain charm to these restrictions. Now, one of these restrictions in the past was that when you specialize in a particular school of magic, you would get benefits for that, but as a disadvantage, you would have to deny yourself access to the opposite schools of magic. So if you specialized in evocation, you'd have to not take any enchantment spells, and this is just a trade-off for specializing. You could be a generic wizard that could take all the different spell classes, but you didn't get a specific benefit on any of the schools of magic. One way of playing Dungeons & Dragons now, if you're selecting a wizard, is you could apply these old restrictions to yourself as a way of increasing the flavorfulness of your character. It is essentially giving yourself a disadvantage, but I always believe in the philosophy that restrictions breed creativity. So if you are selecting from a restricted pool of spells, then you have to think about how you are solving puzzles and problems and combats rather than falling on old favourites. If you have ever played a wizard or DM'd for a wizard, you may be very aware that there are certain old favourite spells that get selected quite often, and even though there are a vast selection of spells that a wizard could take, a lot of them are just straight worse than others. Why would you take certain spells if you could just take Fireball and use Fireball? So Fireball is a very powerful spell. It could be a level 5 spell instead of a level 3 spell, and it would still be balanced. So a further way to restrict yourself is to say, if you're taking one school of magic, you can take the schools of magic next to it. So illusion could take transmutation and enchantment, and then also you couldn't take necromancy, abjuration, or evocation. So you're just pulling from three schools of magic, and mainly your specialist one. So you want the majority of your spells to be the one you specialize in. You could maybe use the occasional ones that are not opposite, but just very few, and this makes for an even more flavorful build. So I'm just going to go through the various schools of magic and just point out certain builds that I think are interesting, and just point out the overall play style of each of the schools and how they fit into this philosophy of restricting yourself by schools of magic. So first up is the School of Abjuration, which is about protection spells. There's a few spells on here that are old favourites that get used quite a lot, such as Mage Armour and Shield. So just the general protection spells for wizards, and Absorb Elements is another good one. The trouble with the School of Abjuration is the list is very shallow, and there's a lot of gaps in it that could be filled by spells that just don't exist. So it's not one that I would recommend for hyperspecialization, because there's just not enough of it. The specialization feats for being abjuration, as in you getting your arcane ward to protect yourself and others, it's quite a fun thing to build around, and you can build around it. You'd have to lean on other schools of magic. So if you were going by the wheel, you would have to take a good number of necromancy spells and conjuration spells to be able to actually do some damage and be of more utility to the party. So you could do that build, but I don't think you could go straight to abjuration, even though there are some good spells on here. Counter spell's quite a good one, and banishment is also a good monster control spell. But yeah, the list is very shallow. Next up is conjuration. Now this is one that I have actually myself made a character specialising in conjuration, and I had a lot of fun doing so. I'd highly recommend it. The conjuration list is very deep. It's got a lot of different things it can do, and they are all quite interesting to do. It's got a decent amount of cantrips. I think it has in 2024 rules, it has lost a couple of its cantrips to other disciplines. So Acid Splash has moved over to evocation, and Poison Spray has moved to necromancy, and these were kind of the main damaging ones, although Create Bonfire is still pretty good, and Sword Burst. So you've got enough damaging cantrips, and you've got utility spells like Mage Hand, which is invaluable. But the main things that conjuration can do, it's got all of the teleportation spells, such as Misty Step and Vortex Warp and Thunder Step and Dimension Door. So you can serve as a rescue character that can move your party around and move yourself around and make sure that people are not getting surrounded. Vortex Warp is especially good for that, because it moves someone else rather than yourself. Another thing they can do is crowd control with spells like Grease and Fog Cloud and Web. These are spells that allow you to gum up the battlefield and stop the enemies from getting out of control. There's a lot of AoE spells as well, such as Ice Knife, Cloud of Daggers, and Spray of Cards now. And Thunderstep serves that as well, and Black Tentacles, and Tidal Wave, that's another good one. These do a lot of damage to lots of different targets, so you can fill the role of blaster on the battlefield. They're obviously not as powerful as evocation spells. If you're expecting the same damage levels of Fireball, you're going to be a little bit disappointed, but they're good enough. And the last thing they do is summoning creatures, such as all of these summon spells, like summon Fae, summon Lesser Demons, summon Shadow Spawn, Conjure, Minor Elementals, all of the 4th level spells like Summon Construct and Summon Elemental Spirit. They're all very good, and allow you to have a little companion on the battlefield to attack the enemies. It's a lot of fun to mess around with. But yeah, the pool for conjuration is very deep. It's one that you can definitely specialize in. If you look at the Wheel of Magic, you can also be taking enchantment spells and abjuration spells. So you get the old protection favourites like Shield and Mage Armour. The enchantment spells, a lot of them fulfill a similar role in crowd control to a lot of the conjuration spells, so you might not need so much of those. They're there if you need them. So you can build a very robust conjurer, I think. Divination, the next one. This is another one that I have played with. You can make an interesting build with it. Problem with the divination spell list is a lot of them are not very good, or are very specific or very niche utility. They won't necessarily help you in combat. The only cantrip they have is True Strike, which has always been bad, and I think still is bad. But you have a lot of what I call plot spells, in that you can use them to sculpt the plot of the campaign. So you kind of need to work in conjunction with the DM to an extent. Otherwise, you might find yourself battling the DM for control of what's actually happening. If the DM doesn't know what you're capable of, can lead to a bit of conflict there. So you got finding spells such as locate object and locate creature at level 4. And these allow you to zone in on a particular creature that you've seen already, or a particular object, so that you can find the BBEG if the DM let you see them at some point. And you've got a lot of spells for spying on other places, like scrying, divination, and clairvoyance. These also can give you information that the DM might not necessarily want you to have, and it might ruin their plans for the campaign if he doesn't know that you can do it. So yeah, it's something that can be quite awkward. But yeah, most divination spells are utility spells, so it's difficult to make a very powerful character or a particularly useful battlefield character. A lot of people take the divination specialization because one of the feats is very powerful. The portent allows you to change dice rolls a couple of times a day, so it allows you to sculpt the future a little bit, and that's something that is obviously powerful. But they just don't take very many divination spells after that, because they prefer fireballs and whatnot. There is another feat that they get at level 6, which allows them to free spell slots in a particular way. Every time they use a spell slot of 2 or above on a divination spell, they get a lower spell slot back again. So you can be very efficient. You can, say, cast a level 1 spell, then cast a level 2 divination, get that level 1 spell back, then use a level 3 divination to get the level 2 slot back, cast a level 4 divination to get the level 3 slot back. So you're getting lots and lots and lots of extra spell slots, being very efficient over the course of a day. The problem with that is that there isn't that many spells that you can really spam as a divination wizard, so it's not one that you can really get a huge amount of value out of in comparison to other schools. If this feat was, say, evocation spells, it would be super broken, but with divination spells it's relatively reined in. However, there is one spell that is very useful for this feat, and that's Mind Spike. This is the only damaging spell that divination has, and it does just 3d8 psychic damage, which isn't a huge amount for a level 2 spell. If you compare it to Chromatic Orb, which does 3d8 at level 1, you can see it's a little bit underpowered. But if you are casting these and getting spell slots back, it is at least efficient, so you can go on for much longer. When I made a divination specialist, I also took a level in cleric, so I was able to get cure wounds and healing word. So I was able to do some healing spells, cast a mind spike, get those spell slots back again, and it was quite fun for a while. I wouldn't say I'd highly recommend it, but it's interesting. It's interesting. I just wanted to see how it worked, and it worked reasonably. So looking at the wheel, the divination can also take transmutation and evocation spells. When I made the character, I steered away from most evocation spells. I had a couple, but not any of the big blasty ones, because I didn't want to have to lean on those. But I was able to get a few damage spells out of transmutation that I could use. Next up is enchantment. So this is another one that I think would be very interesting to make a specialist character on. It's not the most varied list, but it's if you're specializing in one particular thing or a couple of different things, it is robust enough to actually fulfill that battlefield role. So that most of the enchantment spells are either about social interaction, in terms of charming a person with things like friend or charm person to get some social benefit, or they are for controlling people on the battlefield, such as with hideous laughter or sleep or hold person. So you end up being, rather than being a damage-based wizard, you end up being a control-based wizard, and just wasting the enemy's turns each turn, and that's quite a fun, quite a fun play pattern. If you look at the wheel, enchantment is next to illusion and conjuration. So illusion spells also fit into this this kind of trickster trope that the enchantment wizard would most likely be. So they give you a lot of things to mess around with the enemy, which should be quite fun. And in conjuration, you can take things like summon Fey, so you can lean into being some kind of Fey-wild wizard or trickster man. It's definitely something that you could build around. It's one that I definitely think about playing with in the future. It might have a little bit of competition from the warlock of the Fey patron, which kind of fills a similar role, but it's sometimes nice to come at things from an angle that people don't necessarily expect. Now, this is the evocation spell list. Essentially, most wizards tend to be, most generic wizards tend to be heavily evocation wizards, even if they're not taking the evocation specialist feat. A lot of the best damaging cantrips are in evocation, such as Firebolt, Ray of Frost, and Shocking Grasp, and Green Flame Blade. They're all evocation. So they've got a very long list of cantrips that you can play with, or deal with different energies. They take an acid splash off conjuration. A lot of the most damaging spells are in evocation. A lot of the favourites, such as Magic Missile and Thunder Wave and Fireball and Thunderbolt. These are commonly taken spells. When you specialise in evocation, mainly making yourself a blaster wizard, and it's definitely recommendable because it's very powerful. A lot of the main reasons to be wizard are things like Fireball and Lightning Bolt, because they are a good degree more powerful than the best damaging spells in other spellcasting classes. The druids and clerics don't get things like Lightning Bolt and Fireball. They get slightly lesser versions or higher spell slot costing ones. So if you are not taking evocation, you are giving yourself a disadvantage. It's not quite as interesting to specialise fully in evocation, just because you are kind of just making a generic wizard at that point. You're not really restricting yourself very much. There are a few interesting spells in the evocation list that have made it into there. I'm not entirely sure why they're there, such as the sending spell, which is like a message spell. I think it might have moved somewhere else, because I'm only seeing the legacy one. Not sure where it's moved to. But yeah, it was always an odd fit in evocation. And also Leomund's Tiny Hut, which is a spell that creates a little force field so that you can rest in the wilds without getting attacked, which is a very useful spell to have out in the wilds. That one seems like it should be an abjuration spell, but it's not. If you look at the wheel of magic, evocation can also take divination and necromancy, and has to steer clear of these three. The divination's good for utility spells. There isn't that much in necromancy that is worth recommending to the evocation wizard. The damage level of evocation spells is much higher than necromancy spells, but you could, I guess, start raising dead as well once you've blasted them to pieces. So the illusion school, this is one that I almost made a character of. It was a toss-up between conjuration and illusion. I went for conjuration in the end. I definitely think there's enough there in illusion to actually specialise in it, and heavily specialise in it. A lot of the illusion spells are control spells in a way. There's not much in the way of damage, and they control in a slightly different way that is kind of controlled by the DM. It's kind of up to the DM making rolls against investigation about whether they fall through illusions. And once they attack an illusion, it's going to disappear anyway, or they're going to realise that it's an illusion. So maybe not the most effective way of controlling things in comparison to other spells, but it's a discipline a play style that seems like it'd be very fun to play around with, and just getting very creative with it. The sort of the limits with the illusion spells are your imagination, what you're actually summoning when you do it. and yeah, it seems very fun. You've also got the invisibility spells in illusion for stealth purposes. That'd be very useful. Some good protection spells like blur and mirror image that are pretty effective, although blur being a concentration spell sort of limits it a little bit. You've got a few damaging spells, not a huge amount. You've got Phantasmal Force, which I think has been buffed a little bit in the 2024 version, and you've got Phantasmal Killer, which has been buffed as well in 2024, so it actually does damage even if they pass the save, and it's quite a high damage spell as well. Yeah, there's a lot to play around with. There's even some spells that are actually sort of solid go-to spells, even when you're not specialising, like Hypnotic Pattern. That's probably one of the better crowd control spells. That you can hypnotise a lot of people at the same time, and that's one to lean on. Fear's reasonable as well. I think that can crowd control quite a lot of people at once. But yeah, it's definitely one that you could build a character around. And with the 2024 rule book, they have given abilities to the illusionist that are new and fancy and awesome. In that you can get the summon beast and summon fey spells from the conjuration list and count them as illusion spells. So you're summoning illusions that are able to harm the opponent. So you can be a bit of a summoner as well, which looks a lot of fun. And if you look at the wheel, you've got also access to enchantment spells, which would do a similar thing in terms of crowd control. And you've got the utility spells in transmutation, and you just can't take abjurations, necromancies, and evocations. I think a lot of wizards not having access to abjuration is even though it's not the deepest spell pool, you do lose something from not having abjuration. You do lose shield, and you do lose mage armor, which a lot of wizards would benefit from taking. So onwards to necromancy. So this is a very flavorful specialization school. It may not necessarily be the most powerful one. It's got some very good cantrips, such as Chill Touch, Poison Spray now, and Toll the Dead. Toll the Dead's probably potentially one of the more damaging cantrips in that it can do D12 damages instead of D8s. So they're all very good. Its list of spells though is lacking in raw power a little bit, such as like Ray of Sickness. It does do the poison debuff, but its actual damage level is lower than Chromatic Orb, so it's not brilliant. One of its main damaging spells at high levels is Blight, which does a lot of damage to a single target, but if you stack that up against a level 4 Fireball, it's doing not the most amount of damage. Its key spells are the Summoning Undead spells and Raising the Dead. And Animate Dead is quite low impact for a 3rd level spell. You get to summon a skeleton or a zombie, or basically raise them when you find them. Those are like a CR level 1/4 monster, so they're not that powerful when you've only got one of them. It does scale up for higher levels, so you get an extra 2 undead creatures for each spell slot above 3, and you can sort of keep the zombies and skeletons from day to day if you maintain control of them, so that can be quite interesting. It's just don't be surprised if your zombies and your skeletons don't last one combat. The Summon Undead spell is a little bit more powerful, although you don't get to keep that for any longer than an hour, so you can't keep those from day to day. But yeah, there's a lot of spells in the necromancy list that don't feel like they fit the wizard playstyle, such as Spirit Shroud, which is a spell that gives you more melee damage. We've got Vampiric Touch, which deals melee damage and gives you health back, but yeah, that is not very high power. You got the spell Circle of Death, which looks like it'd be very powerful. It does 8d8 necrotic damage to everything that's in a 60-foot radius sphere. The trouble is, a 60-foot radius sphere is gigantic. It's 3 times as big as the fireball radius of 20 feet. So you usually find that unless you're in a gigantic area with all of the enemies arrayed against you on the other side of the battlefield, you're probably going to get yourself and all of your party in the air effect as well, which isn't great. If you want to take necromancy as a specialization, then go for it. It's very flavorful. If that's something that you really want to do, it's definitely possible. It is it is going to be very difficult. I think you have a tough time of it. It would be a restriction with a capital R. Necromancy spells next to abjurations. That's some good protection spells. And it's next to evocation as well. But you'll find that if you start taking evocation spells, you'll be leaning on those, so you're kind of defeating the object of specialization, and you'll find that the more and more you evaluate the evocation spells versus your necromancy spells, you'll go, well, they're so much better, why aren't I casting evocation spells all the time? And you just start to lean on those, and it defeats the whole point. Definitely one for hardcore players that really want to full on specialize in one discipline. So lastly, we have transmutation. So this is another one that's probably not recommended to specialize in. The list is a little shallow and missing a few things. The flavor of transmutation, as in someone that changes the shape of things and changes the nature of things, it could in flavor actually be something that'd be very interesting. There isn't the spells there for it to work out that way. The list of cantrips are pretty much all utility spells with very little combat effectiveness. They're mostly puzzle solving spells or social interaction spells like message and mold earth and shape water, mainly for messing around. You do have a reasonable low level damaging spell in catapult, though I think that's probably about as much damage as chromatic orb, so nothing special. But yeah, there's a lot of movement related spells in transmutation, like jump and long strider and fly and haste and feather fall, and these are all very useful. You could, I guess, be the guy in the party that just speeds everyone up, but it's of low impact, I'd say. The number of spells that actually do buffs to the party are quite low. You've got Dragon's Breath, which gives someone breath weapon, which is reasonable. And you've got Enlarge and Reduce, so you can go around buffing everyone with Enlarge or crowd controlling people with Reduce. There just needs to be more spells of that nature. I could see a world where a transmutation wizard is the guy that buffs everyone and has numerous different buffs for all kinds of different situations. There isn't that many of them that exist. There's not enough of them to fill the full role, and that's a pity. You've got Erupting Earth's a reasonable damaging spell. Does like 3d12 to a large area. So that one's quite good. You could play a little bit of a crowd control role with slow. That one's a reasonable spell. And Polymorph was another old favourite that people like to mess around with, changing things into tiny animals or big animals, depending on what suits. There is one spell that you could base your entire build around, as long as you can get to a significantly high enough level, and that's telekinesis. So this is one that lasts for 10 minutes, so you could use it for like the entire combat, and maybe a combat or two afterwards if you're getting several combats in a row, and it allows you to use telekinetic power to fling objects around and fling creatures around, so you could fuel that for the entire combat with just one spell slot, and that could be your whole deal. But as it's a level 5 spell, you're going to be quite a high level before you actually being able to cast that. So yeah, there's a little bit of a pity. Maybe in the future there will be more spells. The transmutation wizard could lean on illusions and divinations to add to their arsenal, but overall that's probably the least powerful suite of 3 schools you could think of. It's not going to make you the most powerful person on the battlefield, or maybe even pulling your weight as a character. So I wouldn't recommend it. Okay, so that's everything I was going through today. I hope this is food for thought, and if you have been convinced to hyperspecialize and you have some ideas for characters, please put them in the comments below. I'd be very interested to see what you come up with. If you want to like and subscribe as well, that would be very helpful. But bye for now.